Today's guest is Hank Azaria, a six-time Emmy Award winner, Screen Actors Guild Award winner, and Tony Award nominee. Azaria is well known for being a principal voice actor on The Simpsons, voicing over 100 characters. Azaria has partnered with the Human Solidarity Project, a nonprofit initiative that reimagines the diversity paradigm, shifting the focus from checking boxes to genuine human connections. Azaria also sits on the board for Dream Charter Schools, which serves thousands of children across East Harlem and the Bronx through a network of free extended day, extended year, and community sports-based youth development programs. Hi, I'm so excited to welcome to this episode my dear friend, one of the funniest people I know, and just one of the nicest guys I know, my friend Hank Azaria.
Hello. That was a very nice intro. How you doing? I'm so glad I could be with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I really, as I was saying before, want a place where people can talk about health and wellness and recovery and mental health and do it in a very positive way. I think a lot of what we see in the media sometimes are these horrible stories about people's dark times. And while I think that's, obviously important, I have a rule of thumb of always share from your scars, not your wounds. And sometimes with people that are more well known, people are sharing their wounds. So I wanted to use this as an opportunity to really talk about, what's sort of your earliest memory, let's say, of when you had a little bit of insight into, hey, maybe there's another way. Maybe this way that I've been living, there might be another way for me to go forward, or I'm starting to understand this world of mental health a little bit. Because I know for me, it took a really long time before I even had an aha moment of, oh, something's wrong with my thinking and behavior.
I would say, well, growing up, my sisters were a lot older than I was. They're 10 and 12 years older. One of them, my sister Stephanie, ended up becoming an astrologer and a spiritual advisor, and she still does it. She's still very gifted. And I would go to her a lot with teenage problems.
Mm-hmm.
And she was really helpful to me. So it at least created a model of that I could take my trouble somewhere and maybe see a different perspective, a more mature one. Um, and it would be helpful. In my mid 20s, I was about 25. I started going to therapy. I started seeing Dr. Phil Stutz, who Jonah Hill has made quite famous
Right.
lately. And I went there. I was having trouble auditioning. I was getting I had been auditioning for a few years and doing well. And all of a sudden, the same way like an athlete will suddenly get the yips, or like a pitcher or a baseball player will find himself unable to throw the ball to first base all of a sudden.
Mhm.
I was freezing in auditions. And Phil really provided me with I would say psychological, but I think even more of a spiritual solution. Um, and it really worked. And it
What
was,
was one thing that Phil, like, what was one kernel that you remember still that Phil gave you? 'Cause I think so many people now know who he is from the movie, but I love to ask people that have seen him, like, what was that one kernel that you might have got from him that you still remember?
well, there are many. I ended up seeing Phil on and off for about 20 years.
Okay, so we can take two kernels.
Well, that audition stuff,
Yep.
um, I'll do my Phil Stutz impression for you.
Oh, of course.
He would say, so can I curse on this? Can we
Yeah,
we
whatever you want.
he'd say, so, first of all, I would whine and complain. He'd go, yeah, all right, shut the fuck up. Listen, what do you think you're really afraid of in these auditions? What's really scaring you? I would say, well, that I don't get the job, that I'm a failure, that that I die alone somewhere because I
Yeah.
couldn't. He said, no, you're afraid of that, but that's not really what you're scared of. What you're scared of is how badly your own mind is going to beat yourself up for thinking that you didn't do well. And he was exactly right.
Mhm.
And he gave me a tool. He called it, he said, after auditions is like a sacred time, that 20, 30 minutes. He called it the afterburn. He said, in that time, you need to catch your own mind before it starts to destroy you.
Mhm.
And you got to do three things: principle of validation, meaning praise yourself for what went right, and not just how you did well in the audition, but that you had the courage to do it in the first place, that you're
Mhm.
trying this whole life, that you put a lot of work and effort into it and tried your best.
Mhm.
The principle of correction, which is now you kind of tick off, well, what you did wrong. I messed up that line. I froze there. My timing was off there. That was a bad choice. And you're only allowed to go through it three times, the
Mhm.
whole audition. You can only run it through. And then you try to think, well, what would I do differently next time? How would I correct it? And then the third thing was you had to like leave it, like
Mhm.
do this little meditation where you just kind of get back into the present. And then
Mhm.
he'd say, you're in complete fucking violation if you think about that audition after that time. And he told me to do it for like a few weeks and to really not let myself get up from sitting down after the audition until I started to feel a little bit better. And it totally worked. Within about 4 to 6 weeks, I was totally cool with the idea of like failing in an audition because I knew I had
Mhm.
like a sort of a system around it. And it was the first time what he said was I reframed my priorities. It wasn't about getting the job, not getting the job, doing well, not doing well. It's about how do I process this? How can I be kind? How do I do my best, accept less than perfection, and be kind to myself at the same time?
I
So,
love that.
yeah,
I
yeah,
love that. Do you ever do it now for other stuff?
absolutely.
Yeah, such a good tool.
Yeah, I passed that along to many people too. I mean, that was just the first thing I did with Phil. I got over, I would never speak up and say what I really wanted. Um, he got me through all that. He got me through two major relationships, a lot of personal crisis that really, he reframed all of a Hollywood career
Mm,
into how is it a spiritual lesson? He reframed it that way.
I
Because
love that.
it was amazing. It's like, well, he'd say, yeah, this is fucking awful, but that's Hollywood. But that doesn't mean you have to. How do you respond and not react? That was his
Right,
whole thing.
right, right.
I remember like when I started working a lot as an actor, I started being on pretty intense movie sets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Phil, I think I need to yell because it's the only thing anybody pays attention to, you know. I think I need if I because he was getting me to say my truth to
Mm-hmm.
be honest about contributing
Mm-hmm.
my thoughts, creative thoughts. I said, I think I gotta yell because nobody pays attention. I remember him saying, listen, schmuck, under no circumstances are you to fucking yell on a set, right? What you do is you make sure to say your thing. Always, always. You always say what you think it should be. And then you fucking let it go. Unless it's your decision, you fucking say your thing and then you accept the decision and you do it how anybody wants to do it. That's what a professional does. I remember like on jobs like I loved working on Ray Donovan, actually won an Emmy for it. I
Mm-hmm.
think I went 0 for 111. Every single suggestion I made, no.
Right.
But I always said my thing, and I always
Right.
said,
And that you feel heard.
yeah. And
You
then I
feel
happily,
heard.
exactly. Then I happily did it the way they wanted to do it. Um,
It's so interesting because, and we've never talked so much about Phil in all the other many conversations about things, but it's almost like that was my sort of moment working in the industry when, because I was constantly yelling, constantly trying to be a louder voice in the room, a louder woman in the room of men, whatever that was. And there was that one moment where I was sitting in that big conference room and they were like going at each other, like practically over the table. They were going to get into fist fights. And we're talking about big actors, big directors, big executives. And I just remember it was my birthday and I just sat back and I was like, yeah, I don't think you need to say anything here. Like this is chaos. This is not going to work. This conversation, say it later or another time or maybe nothing at all. And that was like a very poignant point. But I don't think a lot of actors get, and a lot of talent did creative individuals work on themselves at the same time. I think there's such a difference in noticing, especially today, who's actually doing the work, the internal work, in order to be successful on the external.
Phil used to talk a lot about that too. And there's a funny story in connection with our old dear friend Matthew Perry.
Mm,
Because Matthew saw him for a while.
yeah.
And so Phil used to say, all right, there's two types of people in Hollywood. There's type A and type B. I don't mean type A like, anal and efficient. I mean, type A are people like yourself, like their success in Hollywood is directly connected to their spiritual growth. In other words, you're not going to proceed unless you figure out how to have more peace because you'll go crazy before you
Yeah.
accomplish it, right?
Yeah.
Then the type B are people who doesn't matter, people like Harvey Weinstein, people who just had nothing to do with their spiritual growth. And so he said that to Matthew, and Matthew's response to that was, okay, so how do I become type B?
I knew you were going to say that. That's exactly what Matthew would say.
Made Phil laugh for like Matthew can make Phil laugh like he did with everybody. Phil would have like 10-minute laughing jags with Matthew's responses in there.
Yeah, exactly. That is 100% what Matthew would say. Like, okay, got it. So how do I become B? That's what we should be working on now.
Yeah, it's taking away. How do I like kill my humanity? Uh,
Yeah.
so
I don't want to do the A. I definitely want to be B. I'm
yeah,
positive, Phil, that I'm paying you now to help me be B.
exactly, exactly. I
That's
think he was half kidding.
yeah.
Yeah,
He half, but half.
yeah.
Um, what do you think your biggest challenge was in your career or in your personal life that was directly related to you having to change something, in the lens that you look through it, in the wellness lens or the recovery lens, or what was a big challenge that stood out to you and how did you get through it? With that, you don't have to share what it was if you don't want to, but just, more information about something that was going on in your life that was very big and without sort of this spiritual perspective and the work that you were doing wouldn't have gotten through it.
There's really too many to name. It's more like pick one in
Mhm.
professional context or personal context or whatever or either.
Either, whatever you feel more comfortable.
I mean, I went into Al-Anon first. I got sober in AA 18 years ago, come July, one day at a time.
Yep,
Went into Al-Anon, which is for families and friends of alcoholics, 7 years before that.
right.
And I had already been with Phil about 10 years before that. So I needed a lot of support.
Yeah.
Um, and I would say this, that my codependent bottom, what sent me into Al-Anon,
Mm,
was harder for me emotionally than even my alcoholic bottom. My alcoholic bottom was not a picnic, but I was fairly what you'd call right, a high bottom, meaning I didn't need rehab. I wasn't like in a health crisis. I didn't even have a DUI yet, although I'm convinced I would have.
yeah.
Um,
I think the yets are so important.
Huh?
People suffer from the yets. I didn't
Yeah.
have, no, this didn't happen yet. This didn't happen yet. This didn't happen yet. But in today's world, with the kind of drugs and things that are available, there's no getting to yets. There's tragedy always.
Yes,
Um,
it's Russian roulette,
it
essentially.
is Russian roulette. But yeah, I think, and I remember, early on meeting you, you had such an understanding of that design for living that 12-step teaches in any program, that you were definitely more, further ahead than the next
Well,
person.
I'd already gone through the steps a couple of times, very earnestly in Al-Anon, and had a lot of recovery in there for about 7 years,
Mm-hmm.
where I got sober from alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And so that served me, but maybe that's why I find it a little bit easier. Like I say, easier. It was a really rough year, my first year off of booze, um, emotionally. But um, yeah, I mean, I guess that the simplest way I can put it is Al-Anon recovery was all about what do I want? Like, stop people pleasing, stop caretaking, stop worrying about like the aforementioned Matthew and a bunch of other people that I was very worried about their sobriety or however else they were being, and
Mm-hmm.
like desperately needed them to change so that I could be all right. It was my belief. Um,
Right.
so that was much harder for me to let go of trying to control people that way.
Yep.
In my recovery from that, I was like, well, what do I like to do? One of the things I realized I like to do is drink, which I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
let myself do too much, really. So in a weird way, becoming an alcoholic was sort of progress because at least I was being more
Right.
selfish. But obviously that got away from me and became too much. And then when I got sober from alcohol, I sort of had to fill in the rest, meaning a lot of my a lot of my the phrase that always hits me is goodwill towards men or bonhomie, or a lot of my good cheer, a lot of my warmth towards people came
Mm-hmm.
out of a bottle. And I kind of had to address that. And it took some time.
Yes, it does. It takes time for us to figure out who we are and be comfortable enough that we can have that connection without that elixir,
Yeah.
because it's not that we can't. And I think a lot of people worry about the fact that they can't, or they don't know how, or it's uncomfortable, and allow for that period of it being uncomfortable, like knowing that you're going to go in. I always say to clients, it's like, when you buy or get a goldfish or win a goldfish or whatever, and then you have to put it in the tank, but you keep it in its original bag of water, and then you put that water in the new tank so that it
Yeah.
can acclimate, and then it can swim out when it's ready, because it would be very shocking to its system to just throw it in a new tank. That's kind of how I look at it when you sort of go back into that world of being social or romantic or having these deep, and then they end up becoming the most authentic relationships we have.
Yes. Yeah, it's a great analogy. And then you have to sort of rebuild, or not even rebuild, you have to build for the first time.
Exactly,
A
exactly.
genuine, yeah. And I'll tell you an interesting, Hollywood story connected to this. I was about a month or two sober, very newly sober.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big party at WME, a fundraiser for a candidate. And it was an afternoon thing, like a wine and cheese thing.
Okay.
And
So for, I think I know, I think I was there. Yeah.
probably were there. We're talking 18 years ago, 17,
Yeah.
18 years ago.
Yeah.
And a lot of high-powered celebrities just in a conference room,
Yeah.
like jam-packed. And it's the kind of thing that I was pretty comfortable at. I've
Mhm.
been around it long enough to
Mhm.
um, not sweat things like that and kind of enjoy them. But in my new sobriety, I was a wreck. I was a wreck.
Yes.
And it's not even the kind of thing that I would have drank at, even though there was wine and cheese. I would never really drank that early in the day. I would wait till 8, 9, 10 o'clock.
Mhm.
So I wasn't like missing booze per se, but
Right.
and I kept saying to myself, what is wrong with me? I feel like I'm 15 years old. I feel like I'm 15 years old. That's the phrase that kept hitting me. And that's true. It's how I felt. It got so bad, Elisa, that I actually went to the bathroom and splashed water on my face. Like, I gotta calm down. And then I kept saying, God, I feel like I'm 15. Then I started asking myself, and this is where program comes in, mindfulness. You start to like be introspective enough to go, why do I keep saying that to myself? What is
Yes.
that? What's with that phrase? And I realized 15 is when I started drinking.
Yep.
That's why I feel like I'm 15 years old, because they say that you get sort of emotionally arrested at the age where you
Exactly.
pick up. And so I had stopped with the booze and I felt 15 and I rediscovered why I drank in the first place, which I was incredibly socially awkward. You know, William Goldman, right? He called Hollywood high school with money, right? And that's
Yep.
really all it is.
Yeah,
So I
exactly.
felt like the not cool kid. And
Right.
and what was weird was it wasn't even like I needed to drink in that moment. I needed to know that a drink was coming. Like that late
Right.
in the night there was a martini or
There
three.
was a reward for the pain.
Yeah. And without that, I would like panic. And that was like a solid year or two.
I
Um,
agree. I agree. I think most people feel that way. I remember, having to go to a lot of events for work and in Hollywood at the time I was, and having to, obviously not drink. And I would, I had this whole routine. I would go to the bar, and when I first walked in, I would go right to the bar and I would get a Diet Coke, and then I would look around and see if there was anyone like comfortable that I could just stand with. And if there wasn't, I would go to the bathroom. Then in the bathroom, I would say the serenity prayer and I would leave the Coke, and then I'd come back out and I'd do it again if I needed to, until 15, 20 minutes of me kind of acclimating to the room and the energy. And then I would go and like do my work. But I also went in a lot of times with a plan and like a to-do list. If I want to talk to so-and-so about this, I want to talk to so-and-so about this. I had like bullet points of what I was going to talk about, because I'd get in there and I'd freeze and I'd feel like a loser and I'd feel like a teenager. And I was like, everyone knows what they're doing. And I've all of a sudden forgotten everything I know. And yeah, so it's a thing. And it is also about really figuring out who you are. Like, what are your likes? What are your dislikes? What music do you like? What's your favorite food? Like, all of these questions that you learn as you're growing up, that for those of us that, anesthetize, like we didn't really think about that kind of stuff. We didn't grow up in the same way. So for me at 34, getting sober was like, who the hell are you?
exactly, because we had this false self. In order to cope with being that false self, which we adopted to survive, we
Mm-hmm.
drank to sort of numb out how uncomfortable and painful it all was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I totally relate to that. And that's why you need some support because it's very hard to do that alone. It's hard to believe that making yourself that uncomfortable or in that or getting back in touch with that much pain from when you were a kid or a teenager can be good for you without other people
Yes.
supporting you and saying, I understand that happening to you. That ends. It's hard to believe that it's ever going to end, that
Yeah.
discomfort. Yeah.
So listening to you, I feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, and talk about how you balance it, that you continuing to do the inner work, or as I like to say, continuing to grow down into who you are, is equally, if not more of a priority than everything else, because without it, and how do you balance it all? I mean, you have a career, you have a family, you have a lot of friends, you have a big life, let's say. You have a big life. And how do you prioritize it, and how meaningful is it for you, and how quickly do you notice when you forget to prioritize it?
Yeah, it's a good question. Phil had a thing about that too. He would say, usually preface everything. He lovingly called me schmuck. Schmuck, listen, it has to be the most important thing in your life, even if it's only by 51 to 49%.
Mhm.
Got to be the priority because that's where everything stems from. I mean, we call it the priceless gift of serenity, right? But what that really means is you'll go nuts. I
Mhm.
will, unless I'm attending to this, and it never ends. It's one day at a time, but he called it the plant principle, meaning if you water a plant every day for 30 years, that's great, but you can't stop watering it. It'll die. And that's true of this stuff, or you can think of it in terms of maintaining a car engine, or,
Mhm.
or your daily insulin. A diabetic doesn't graduate out of needing insulin.
Right.
We call it the daily reprieve. You get it if you do the things you need to do to be okay. And so I do that, make it a priority. I'm a, you look at a schedule for the week, and I know that if 4 meetings aren't in it, I'm going to be in trouble. I know that if connecting with sponsor and sponsees aren't in it, I'm going to be in trouble. Not eventually, but not after too long. I can't go more than 3, 4 days before I
Mm-hmm.
start getting real edgy. I just
Yep.
noticed, like just little, I noticed at the gym, I started having thoughts like, get away from me. That guy's an idiot. I'm on that machine, you dummy, or whatever, right? Or
Yep.
in the streets of Manhattan here, all of a sudden everybody's annoying on the street and not,
Yes. We lose our patience so fast.
yeah, restless, irritable, discontent.
Yep.
Is the way Bill W. referred to it in the big book. And I've now gotten good at recognizing my first little baby steps in that direction, like, oh,
Yep.
thumbs up.
Yep.
And so I have to do it because everything else flows from there. I don't have any peace or connection. The other thing I've really learned is this. One of my favorite quotes from the rooms is the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. So
Exactly.
if I don't genuinely connect for real with folks, either about addiction or codependency or whatever it is, but if I
Mm-hmm.
don't get real with folks, hear from them and them hear from me, I will soon start to go off the rails.
Yep. Yeah. No, I agree. And I like to say that when it comes to shame, when, someone's like, how do I get out of this? I'm like, the opposite, of shame is connection, because shame leaves you feeling alone and secret and bad. And if you can just get honest with that one person and who can hold space and who can hear it without judgment, then, that's where you want to go. That's where you want to connect.
Exactly. I mean, that's the whole model. I mean, we walk in there as drunks, as alcoholics, and our biggest secret is we're a drunk and we're an alcoholic.
Right, right,
We don't want it to be true. We want anybody to know it. And
right, right. And we
when
think
you
we're
go,
walking in there. I remember the first time I walked in to AA, I asked some woman to take me, and we went, and I literally, if they gave me a sheet to put over my head, like when I first walked in, like I wanted to just be this invisible. I wanted to hear what everyone said, but I wanted to desperately be invisible because I didn't want anyone to see me there.
yeah, I didn't want to see myself there.
Yeah.
I just don't want this to be the reality. And then what comes out by sharing it and hearing others, you're like, whoa, that's actually what I was afraid was my greatest weakness, the point where I'd kind of rather die than admit it almost. Actually, is my greatest strength. It's what connects me, not only with other drunks, recovering drunks, but kind of with everyone, because
Yes.
everybody has their own version of something they consider shameful or some pain they've been through that is just heartbreaking. And I didn't have really enough compassion until I admitted my own defects and addictions, and it connected me to people.
Yeah. Yeah. So what is the worst advice someone has ever given you?
Worst advice. Um, I call that guy in the diner stuff. Like you hear from sponsees. Well, somebody tell me blah blah blah. I said, look, that's a guy in a diner telling you what to
I love it.
do. Um, man, there's been a lot. What can I say?
Yeah.
Really
I
bad.
think that's it. Knowing, is that a guy in the diner or is that like a legitimate, I have what I call my board of directors. And so maybe my sponsors in my board of directors and, but there's also like my soul sober sister that I've been sober with for 20 years. And, there's a couple of people and because you'll get lots of guy in a diners, gals in diners.
Yeah.
Like those are the people that I go to check. Is this is this the right? Is this am I going right or left or what do you am I off or and really trusting, trusting the board.
Yeah, I mean, I'm having trouble thinking of a specific example, but maybe because I knew you from such a Hollywood context, I keep thinking about that whole Hollywood journey. But it's anytime anybody ever told me to, like just keep pressing it, like keep like just suck it up and double down, like
Yeah.
especially career wise. Uh,
Yeah.
don't take a minute to take a knee or relax or breathe or think about how this is
Right.
affecting you.
Or
You know,
what you really want. Like what because if you head towards the things that are calling you, the things that are interesting to you, because you'll get so many opinions. No, 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 you should be doing this. This is the thing. This is the job. This is the thing. It's gonna make this thing is gonna take you to this thing and da, 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 da. And you stop following your intuition.
yeah, or what you might really want, what might really make you happy. I mean, lately I'm very onto in recovery, like society as qualifier, like not just our families, but just like what is this whole collective belief we have? And every society, every culture has their own.
Hmm.
Like, for example, like you go back to ancient China, like the foot binding thing, that was
Hmm.
pretty awful, but
Right.
everybody was doing it. Um,
Right.
we have like a serious workaholism thing.
Yeah, we do.
And the Hollywood version of workaholism, I was victim to for so long. Like you
Yeah.
just got more and more, build, 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 go, go, go. Only
Yeah.
as good as your last thing. And I'm really grateful that I climbed down off of that. Like, oh, I don't need to, when you smash into program with that mentality. I remember my sponsor, saying to me cute things like, well, you're a human being, not a human doing. Because essentially I felt I was only really as good or as valuable as how my last project did, you know.
Right. And
And
that's such a terrible way to live.
it's awful, it's understandable. You want to compete, you want your thing to be great, you want it to be excellent, you want to put everything into it, and we all do. But at the end of the day, it can't be like really the thing that defines you as a human. I mean,
Right.
ultimately, it can't be, or you're going to be very unhappy, at least eventually, even if the project's a huge hit. Well, can you do it again? Oh, you did it twice. Can you do it a third time? Oh, you did. Can you do it a fourth time? I mean, at one
Yeah.
point, your dice roll, your hot roll is gonna
Yeah, exactly.
run out, right? Do we know
Yeah.
anyone who hasn't?
Yeah.
So I remember here's a bad advice I got once.
Okay, let's hear
I'm at
it.
a premiere. I'm at a premiere. And it was sort of at the height of my doing well. Like, I was really on a roll, as we were just referring to. And someone came up to me and said, oh, I forget who it was, but some older celebrity wanted to meet me, right?
Mhm.
I can't remember who it was, but somebody I respect and love. Like, I can't remember. It was somebody sweet, like Harvey Korman or something, or
Okay.
you, or somebody beloved like that.
Yeah.
I saw them standing right there. And I went to go, oh, and so I started to make a beeline for them. And my publicist at the time, who's not my current publicist, kind of grabbed me by the arm and said, kid, don't ever go to them. They should come to you. I'm like,
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like that's
yeah.
really bad Hollywood advice.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
get where he's coming from, right? But that's like it in a nutshell, right? Like, don't be a human being who loves Harvey
Yeah.
Korman
Pretend
and is
that you
warm
don't
to
see
him
them.
and respectful to him because he's your elder and a sweet hilarious man who's given you nothing but laughter and joy in your life,
Right.
play a game where he's got to come to you. It's like, oh my God, it's exhausting,
Yeah,
you know.
it is exhausting. Yeah, I'm glad you knew that that was bad advice.
I didn't at the time.
Oh,
I think I
that's
stayed
that's
put.
the word. Yeah, you
And
stayed put. She silenced you.
yep, it was a he.
He
But
silenced you.
yeah, I was like, okay, you must be right. That was like the voice of
That's
Hollywood saying to me, no, 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 no human feelings. The status thing, do
yeah,
it.
that's the thing. And it's literally no different in, even now, like from that exact thing where it's like, oh, so and so said to do it this way. I mean, I was raised under a bunch of different men in Hollywood that were very, had very big personalities and da da da. And so I only thought that that was the way.
Yeah.
And that did not serve me. It made people not like me. And then when I got sober and started to have any kind of success, and I started to get that feedback of like, I don't like your tone, I don't like this, you're this, I was like, oh wow, like my insides are not matching my outsides, and how am I going to switch that now? And that was a lot of work. That
Yeah.
was a lot of work because I was like, I don't want to be that.
Yeah. I mean, I get that. I had very not healthy examples of success also, other
Mm-hmm.
actors around me.
Exactly.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I thought, well, I guess that's how you do it. And
Exactly.
how they did it, but it didn't have very happy results for them. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
really grateful that I kind of got to watch that
Yep.
and then, recover out of that because I had to recover out of that mentality as equally or more so than the part of me that just wanted to drink and numb out. I mean, it was just equally as hard to like change my thinking, like you just mentioned.
Yep, yep, exactly. Well, this has been an incredible wealth of information that I think is going to help a lot of people because this is, I think, the things that people want to hear. It's a way for us to share and maybe inspire someone else to go, yeah, me too. And if they could do it, maybe I can.
Yeah, I hope so. I think it's great you're doing this, Elisa. And yeah, you can really be, by the way, like, do that more human connected approach. Sometimes I win, sometimes I lose by Hollywood or any other standards, but I'm always connected and enjoying the process, which I could never say before, even in
Right.
tremendous success.
Yep.
Crush it and be like, why do I feel so empty?
Yeah.
Uh, it was really a horrible moment in my life when I realized that getting everything I wanted and beyond didn't really make me happy. And
Exactly. The
yeah,
external successes do not bring us joy. They have an expiration date on them. And sometimes they'll last a week, a month, an hour, but they're not lasting.
no, I know we've all seen it, right? The first year or two that someone, for lack of a way to put it, gets famous, it's
Mhm.
very exciting and intoxicating, and it's wonderful. But that's not sustainable. That feeling and that process, you can't get famous again. Once
Yeah,
once it happens, it becomes a thing to maintain, a job, something to
yeah,
attend to, something to
yeah,
have choices around, and I always thought that becoming rich and famous, for lack of a better way to put it, would solve all my problems, would like take all the decisions away. Like I'm just touchdown dance, and then that's it.
I'll just sit here and it'll all just happen for me.
Exactly. I mean, I was like, what do you mean I have to pick my next project and it has to be good?
And then I
That's
have to be
really
good. Well, what if
stressful.
the director's not good? And what if it's a bad producer? And what if the studio sucks? Like I did and it's just it's a crapshoot.
But what if the zeitgeist isn't lined up correctly to receive my
They
project?
didn't get the sides I gave them.
Exactly.
They're
Not
not saying
for
the right thing.
Yeah, that gets really exhausting and misery making as opposed to let me just show up one day at a time and do my best and enjoy. That's like I want to leave maybe it's on that note, like that was the big joke I got one day at a time in program. Then I'm like, that applies to my work. All I ever really have is my day's work, whether I'm on
Yeah.
a big fancy set or doing a children's theater project for charity or working on a pitch on something that
Mhm.
will never see the light of day
Mhm.
or whatever it is, right? Like all I had, did I enjoy it? Was I creative with it? Did I
Yeah.
make connections while doing it?
Yeah.
No one can take away from you.
That's the best advice. Thank you for ending on that note.